Hello, guys and gals, and welcome to another episode of Path of Exile 2 Skills. We're going to be going over a specific skill today that I've done a lot of work with, and it is Fangs of the Frost. Fangs of the Frost is one that I originally picked up back in, like, I don't even know, like the Huntress season? What was that, like point 0.2 or point 0.3 or something? And I tried it, and I didn't really like it, and then I kind of like put it down for a little while and picked it back up, and eventually it kind of clicked with me, and I've actually had a lot of fun with it. Let's just talk about the gem itself before we get started with anything else, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty. So Fangs of the Frost is an attack, first off, which is important because it works with attack-based stuff. It is an AoE, a melee strike cold skill. Strike is a very important thing here because strike allows it to do some pretty fun stuff, and we'll talk about that. It does have some pretty decent damage, as you can see, 532% attack damage. It is a dex-based skill, so at level 90 it requires 157 dex, which is a lot. The stab itself is pretty simple. It's just conversion of 80% of your physical damage to cold. You don't necessarily have to have a physical damage weapon here. A lot of people get really confused about this, and they think that they need a physical damage weapon because it converts physical damage to cold. But the fact of the matter is no, you don't need a physical weapon. You can utilize a cold weapon just as easily as you can utilize a physical weapon. Like, for instance, my weapon right here has basically no physical damage on it whatsoever. If you look at it, it is essentially primarily cold damage. It's a T1 cold mod, a T1 cold mod, increased elemental damage with attacks, which is nothing to do with physical, and it has only the base physical damage on the sphere, which is only 55 to 92. And as you can clearly see, despite the fact that it has only the base damage of the spear, I'm still dishing out like 68k damage explosions here, right? So don't think that just because it says conversion of physical to an elemental is you have to have physical. This is just a way for the game to give you the ability to use an elemental damage attack with a physical weapon. You can still use a physical weapon, or you can use an elemental damage weapon. I could utilize a fire damage spear or a lightning damage spear, and I could convert Fangs of Frost into almost entirely lightning or fire if that's what I want to do. Now, there are some disadvantages to doing that specifically, and we'll talk about those as well as we go. So as you see, it says 190% more magnitude of chill inflicted, and it has 190% more freeze buildup. So freeze buildup would not apply to lightning or fire damage, right? So if you did utilize a fire or a lightning weapon with this ability, although you can convert the elemental damage to whatever you want, you cannot convert this to a different like effect, right? You're not going to change the freeze buildup to something else. Now, Fangs of the Frost has increased melee strike range as well, and the extra benefit from the Gemini Legionnaire is even more melee strike range, which gives it plus 1.3 and plus 0.4, which you can also get more melee strike range in the form of the board, and you can also get melee strike range on your weapon. It's kind of insane, actually. There's also a chance to not consume the Parry debuff, which is the mechanic of how the ability works. So we're going to talk about that as well. So perform an icy stab that exploits the enemies who are already off balance. Hitting a parried enemy target consumes the debuff and causes an explosion of frost and leaving chilled ground. Chilled ground is also really cool with this. So not only can you utilize Fangs of Frost as a like an effect to get damage, right? So like just as a damaging effect, you can also utilize it as a way to get massive amounts of chilled ground. Now, you can utilize it for the damage portion, in which case you probably want to use things like Elemental Armament 2, Close Combat. Concentrated Area actually works surprisingly well with this ability. Cold Attunement and Ancestral Call is actually one that I use for a specific reason, and we'll talk about why I use Ancestral Call later. The explosion portion of it is 100% physical damage to cold, so there's no physical damage left. It has the same 380% more magnitude of chill and 380% more freeze buildup, so it's designed around freezing and chilling enemies. It also has the explosion and chilled ground radius is 2.2 meters, so it tells you how big the chilled ground is. Overall, the skill itself is kind of mediocre if you're not utilizing the parry debuff. I actually have built a character around this without the parry debuff, and it was okay. It wasn't the most amazing thing in the world, but it was alright. As you play and you actually mess around with this ability, you'll get a better understanding of how it functions. Now, parry itself, which was a mechanic that was separate from Fangs of Frost, and I'll probably do an entire video on parry as well, so look out for that. But parry requires that you parry a target. So if we have any target that comes nearby, we obviously want to parry them first, which gives the parry debuff, but it doesn't last very long, as you can see. It only lasts like a couple seconds. But when you utilize Fangs of the Frost with the parry debuff, you get a very nice explosion. Now, if you don't have the parry debuff active, it just does the hits. So you're just doing the generic hits. That's why when you look at Fangs of the Frost with the advanced panel, you're going to see the stab, which is a separate damage. As you can see, average damage per use 27,000. And then the explosion, which is average damage per use, is 57,000, right? So the explosion is much higher damage than the stab, and the stab only hits one target. Now, the stab is what consumes the parry debuff, though, and this is important in basically making this function the way that you want it to function, right? So the reason why I'm using Ancestral Call, and I promise to talk about this, is because the Ancestral Call gives me the ability to have two identical versions of myself essentially pop up, and they also attack. You can see them right here. It only happens once every certain number of seconds, but these identical versions will also use Fangs of the Frost on the target. On top of this, I'm also utilizing an ability called Tribal Fury. Tribal Fury allows strikes, as you can see specifically, and for Fangs of the Frost is a strike, that deal splash damage, which allows them to hit multiple targets. Now, this allows me to do some very interesting things with Fangs of the Frost that you would otherwise not be able to do, because you need to be able to pull the parry debuff, and you also need to be able to dish out the damage, right? So if you get into a large pack of monsters like this, and let me see if I can find a nice juicy pack, and you parry all the monsters, you want all the explosions to happen at the same time. And that's what Ancestral Call and Strike's Tribal Fury does for me, is it allows me to essentially pull every single parry debuff simultaneously, allowing me to dish out massive amounts of damage to an entire pack, as opposed to just simply pulling one parry debuff. Now, to get the parry debuff on multiple targets the way that I'm currently getting it, it took me a little bit of work as well. And I'll dive into this in more detail in the actual parry video, but let's talk about it briefly in this video, because it does have to do with the mechanics of how Fangs of the Frost works. So if you take a look at the passive tree, and you just search for the word parry, you'll come up with a couple parry clusters. There's parry clusters all over the place, in fact. Some of them are more or less important than others. Some of them specifically state increased parry hit area of effect. Now, these are the most important for when it comes to trying to parry and hit multiple targets. Think about parry as a cone, right? And it goes out like this. Well, it only hits a small number of targets to begin with. In fact, if you just use the base parry with no bonuses, one thing you're going to notice is that, yeah, you hit a couple targets, but you're not going to hit the amount that I hit. When I go into a pack, because of the way that I've built parry, and I've actually built into those nodes specifically that build the parry debuff, I can go into a pack of monsters, parry one target, and everything is parried at the same time. This allows me to get a massive amount of damage increase, and also obviously get all my explosions off. Now, it's not just the damage, the actual explosions, and here's a really good place to show this off, so let's do it here. Let me just kind of like stand here for a second and let them crowd around me. See how large the influence of my parry debuff is by comparison to like what a normal player might have? I can parry essentially a very large number of monsters at the same time, allowing me to get a large number of explosions as a result. On top of this, I've also realized that you can parry inanimate objects, like for instance a shield wall, which allows me to utilize monsters to gain a parry debuff on the inanimate sources, giving me a much larger ability to do more explosions. So the way that Fangs of Frost works is actually quite beautiful in that it allows you to get, obviously, the chilled ground. It also allows you to get the explosions, which do massive amounts of AoE damage. You can utilize the strikes to pull multiple parry debuffs. You get the parry debuff damage increase, which is also really nice, by the way. I have mine beefed up, but if you take a look at my buff debuff magnitudes, more attack damage taken inflicted 118% on any target that has a parry debuff. So the amount of damage that I'm actually doing with Fangs of Frost is kind of convoluted, because when you look at the actual tree and you see the Fangs of Frost damage number, like for instance that I can do up to 68,145 damage, that's not even true. Because when I parry debuff a target, I'm getting a huge bonus to that damage via the parry debuff, so that when the explosion goes off, you're getting a much larger amount of damage. Now, if you didn't want to utilize Fangs of the Frost specifically for its damage output, you could utilize it for its chilled ground. And there's a lot of really interesting support gems that you can utilize for chilled ground to make it into a very powerful ability. For instance, if I were to pull up the support gems real quick for Fangs of the Frost, and you just type in ground, there's several that you can utilize. One is encroaching ground, which causes supported ground surfaces to increase in size every second up to 100% of its maximum size, which is actually really cool, giving you essentially a much larger chilled ground that you can utilize. And there's also persistent ground 3, which basically makes it so that you get increased duration of all of your ground sources, so you have to do it less. And then there's also Frost Nexus, which makes it so whenever you freeze an enemy, you get chilled ground as well. So you can basically double up on your chilled ground, which is actually kind of cool. Fangs of the Frost can definitely be a very powerful source for chilled ground. And if you utilized encroaching ground with persistent ground and also Frost Nexus, and then probably you would want to throw in freeze as well. So you'd probably throw in the 50% more freeze buildup as well, because that would probably help with getting the Frost Nexus to go off. If you did all that just as a support ability, you can definitely make Fangs of the Frost put some absolutely crazy chilled ground out, where like the whole ground will just be covered with chilled ground for as far as the eye can see. Overall, it's one of my favorite abilities on the Spirit Tree so far. It's an amazing melee ability. It's really good in combination with parry, and just really fun. I think that I've probably built like 3 different characters, but this is definitely the culmination of all of that. And the amount of damage that I can put out with this character is kind of dirty. Especially when you go to like a boss or something and you really like see the actual damage output. This is just like a tier 15 map, but let me go run to the boss real quick, and let's get a visual representation of my current damage output on like a boss. I actually have a slightly better weapon than this that I'm currently using. The only reason I'm using this weapon is because I'm trying to do like a hybridized builds, and I wanted plus attack skills instead of plus melee skills, because I was trying to do a couple projectile skills as well. But let's go play with Big Boy over here. So we're going to hit him with the Frost Bomb first. We're going to put 2 walls down, boom, boom, and then we're going to let him parry us, and then we're going to pop him. As you can see, I did 1.7 million with a bleed immediately, and he's dead. Very fun build, very fun way to make a character. I think it's like literally one of my favorite characters so far, for sure. But I think that's pretty much it. If you have any questions about Fangs of the Frost or anything specific that you want to know about it, I'm pretty much an expert at it at this point, because I've been messing around with it for like multiple seasons. As always, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe button if you enjoy the content, and keep watching.